Now, as the host of your favorite technology podcast, What the Tech, I'll be talking about going to space today. Yep, today's guest is on a mission to get us to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. In this week's episode, I'm actually squaring up with an accomplished entrepreneur and founder of really multiple aerospace companies who is currently working on building an engine to speed up interplanetary travel to Mars. Now, I know out of this world tech, and you're really excited to hear what I have to say. So now during our conversation, we'll actually be talking a little bit about how he became interested in space exploration and what challenges he's faced in developing his engine and what the future of space travel actually looks like. So whether you're a space enthusiast or just curious about what it takes to get to Mars or to move satellites around in orbit, I hope you're excited to tune in for a galactic conversation. So in the words of the great Han Solo, don't get mushy on me. Sit up straight and turn on your listening ears. This is What the Tech. Our next guest is an entrepreneur who has a deep understanding in propulsion and autonomous systems and has applied a variety of solutions and new concepts in the automotive and aerospace industries. His efforts have been recognized by the Royal Aeronautical Society and the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And he's actually started 3 companies with really everything being pointed towards his passion for the aerospace industry. But he's also started many other disruptive companies as well. And he's actually designed the first autonomous system for distress tracking and Airbus and commercial aircraft. And in 2015, he actually influenced aerospace education with a book called Fundamentals of Aerospace Engineering. It was really a beginner's guide. And so I'm excited to have him on the show today to talk about his work in the field of space travel. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Ali Bakhchissar.
Thank you. Glad to be here for the second time.
So good to catch up with you, man. It's been a minute. A lot has happened, and so I'm excited to get a report card from you on how you've been doing and how much of my advice that I gave you last show did you actually take. My guess, if you're doing well, you probably didn't take much of it.
I was going to say, which advice? Did you mean the dance suggestions? I didn't do those. I mean, not live.
Hey, look, man, my dance suggestions are fire. So if you didn't take them, that's to your own detriment. That's why you're not swimming in money and all the other things, the fame and
well, probably there is a reason, right? Or more than one reason.
I'll give you all the reasons. Don't worry. You'll have another playbook before you end, the conversation with me.
Sounds good.
But I did hear some rumors and some really exciting things, going on there in LA. And I wanted to bring them up. It was the first thing that I want to really talk about, but the rumors were around you with your move to LA that you're actually leaving the space industry to pursue your true passion to become an actor. And so I wanted to ask you, what would you say about these rumors and to your adoring fans? Is this true, Ali?
Very good question. So you did well your research. Yes, I'm becoming an actor. No, I'm kidding. I'm definitely not becoming an actor. I do love. So it's actually a funny story. 2 weeks ago, I was with a couple of friends. It was a bigger community. We were maybe 30, 40 people, and one guy came and said, "Hey, we want to do this short 1-minute film." And I've actually never acted before, so. And then I said, you know what, tonight I feel like I could be an actor. So I put my hands up. 5 other people put their hands up. And they said, okay, we're going to do an audition. 1 sentence, you go for it. And in that 1 sentence, when I went for it, I did all sort of things. I cried on the stage. I was very happy. I was doing all these different things. And they were like, oh my God, you're really good. I was like, yeah, that looks really good. I'm really good. So I actually acted as the main character that night for that 1-minute film. And then I thought about it, I was like, it's maybe nice once in a while when, you're working on something very, very specialized. You're fighting all these problems, solving what kind of actuator you want to use for your spacecraft, how much trust you want to have in your engine, how do you play all these different problems, and you're living and fighting and keep boxing these problems. It's nice to go to a completely different space for an hour or 10 minutes and think about how do you just not deal with any of that, but try to read a sentence in like 5 different ways. So I definitely enjoyed that 1 minute film.
I saw the video, man. I think you've got some real talent there. So if this whole, rocket, propulsion thing doesn't work out, I think maybe acting's in your future.
Plan B, right?
Yeah.
You can do something.
Yeah, a plan B. You never know.
Yeah.
It's where your passions meet your expertise.
That's true. That's true.
So really the last time you and I spoke, you were actually still in Germany. And you were trying to get stateside. And I know there was a whole lot of loops and, things that you had to jump through to make that happen. But you've got a new project now. It's called Plasmos. And Plasmos Space, I think, is the website, right?
Right.
And it's really exciting. So catch me up, because there's been some changes from like what your primary intention was. We talked about going to Mars, and some of those things, but you were actually in a video I was watching, you were actually talking about like how you're going to use the engine now for satellite, movement and things like that. So I'm very interested in kind of like the shift and where you found this new opportunity.
Yeah. So a lot has happened, right? From the last year when I was in Europe and still in the European mindset, and then moved to the Valley and the Bay Area and California, and I saw really how it is like to build a startup here. You visited the SpaceX, visited a bunch of other very successful companies, entrepreneurs, met with them, talked with them. I saw couple of things, and I try to summarize it in 3 things. Number 1, extreme focus. So something that I was really impressed with, for example, Benny Buller and his team at Velo 3D have achieved, is that they extremely stayed focused on solving one problem, going out of, the giant competitions and finding a niche and finding a problem that they can really tackle and master that. And they really did, right? So with the 3D printers we are using from them and with their quality. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the team, right? It's maybe even number 1. So you have to have a very small but very focused group that you are always, bouncing off of each other and trying to fine-tune the way you are going about solving a problem, understanding where their expertise lie and where you trust their intuition and where you trust their intentions and knowledge, and how do you mix and match these different things for, say, building in a spacecraft or an engine and whatnot.
Right.
And number 3 is knowledge, right? And I'm talking about knowledge by a famous person that he says it's knowledge, and knowledge is by you learn it by doing, right? So it's also we learn by doing how really the dream of an engine that we can go to Mars with it, as we talked last time, in a shorter amount of time, in using direct injections, and all of those things are still things that I dream about at some point of the time in the future, but a much longer future than what we are living through the next 5 to 10 years plan of the company. So saying those 3 things, I want to come back to every single one of them and talk a little bit about it, if that's fine for you. 1, the focus changed, and the reason for that is multiple things. So when I moved here, I saw so many entrepreneurs that are not focused. They are trying to solve multiple problems at the same time, and I just didn't like that. So I wanted to differentiate myself by staying focused and finding a problem and try to tie that to a problem that I think is really relevant. So when I was talking to John Rising, who is one of my current advisors, and he used to work at the SpaceX and other space firms like Relativity and so on and so forth. And when I really understood the problem that is in the market, and I came here and I started to prepare the pitch and talk to VCs, and I always talk about what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? So the problem, when I started to really understand that, I saw a gap. I saw a first gap. I saw the first gap that was big, and then I saw a second gap, which is also how VCs see a future for a space industry. And then I saw another gap, which is how industrial problems are today in the space industry. Talking about traditional space companies like Lockheed Martin, Airbus, Boeing, and others. And you see they are also struggling with catching up with very, very new, very focused, innovative companies like SpaceX. And so when you see all these things in the space industry, it kind of builds a nice frame, and I would say a giant room. And when you are in that room, then you are like, okay, there is so much opportunity to do something, but you're not going to be successful to build an entire thing in this giant room at the beginning. So you want to start with one point, saying, okay, this is the point I want to prove. And so how can I solve that problem? So the problem became more and more when I did my research became last mile delivery, and then I got myself familiar with what last mile delivery problem really is versus what VCs think the last mile delivery is. And frankly, some VCs really understand that problem well. And then when you talk to the industry, then you understand they don't really want to pay for it as much money. So you are like, okay, so you have this problem, but you don't want to pay too much money for it because it's not worth your satellite is costing $3-4 million if you're going to a lower Earth orbit. So you don't really want to pay $8 million necessarily to launch that, or on top of what you're paying for the launch to space to get to the final orbit. So it's also becoming the what some experts call the space economy, right? So we are slowly touching on
Right.
not only let's do cool, challenging projects like NASA has done for a number of years, and they have done, they have opened the door for us to do these things, but now it's not anymore the time. It's now the time that we talk numbers in a space. So the economical aspect of the space industry is becoming important. So then you start to kind of gather these pieces of a Lego of your company that you want to build. You're like, okay, I want this to become economical. I want this to be focused. So when we said focus, we focused on LEO deliveries. We focused on last mile delivery. And on top of that, we focused on orbits above 200 kilometers, all the way up to 1,400 kilometers. And we left everything else outside of our scope. And I said, okay, so we have came up with this engine idea in the beginning, and we had some success until that time. And then I started to realize, wait a second, I was playing with this idea. Is this a pivot? Is this part of it? And we are still playing with that idea. But the more I go on and follow my intuition, I see these two ideas are not irrelevant. When you are intending to go to an orbit in around the Earth, you have a very high speed. And when you want to come back from that to the Earth, which is kind of what we are doing, talking again about the focus and solution, it's needing a very powerful engine, yet efficient. So that was exactly the topic. And I was like, wait a minute, we have something here. So then it really started to, I restarted the company's structure around, okay, this is actually the problem we are solving, and then we are bringing these pieces of the puzzle. And of course, propulsion system is going to be our primary focus for the future as well. But we found one really good application that is really needed by the market. And it's attracting venture capitalists because it's first of all, it's a simple idea to explain. Second of all, it's an idea that is needed in the market. And third of all, it's an idea that a company like a SpaceX had a lot of success using, bringing the reusability to access a space in an economical way. So that's where I talk about then the economy aspect of the space race. So a longer answer than I guess.
No, I like it. Yeah. So it's primarily because, like I think in 2020 versus 2021, there was 40% more satellites that went up. Right. And so, a lot of those satellites, can serve different purposes, but if they can't move around efficiently, and that's my understanding, you're kind of creating an engine that can be attached to almost like a tug system, right? Where you drag these things wherever you want them, reposition them, and there's already a need for that. And not that there's not a need to go to Mars, we're moving in that direction, but you can serve, corporations that are leveraging, satellites right now, and things like that all over the world, to kind of, again, repurpose things. I saw a video of yours. It talked about getting, space garbage out of the way, right? Like, use it for a lot of different applications, right, especially as things start to get really congested up there.
Right.
Because it eventually will be a problem.
Yeah. So that was also one of the focuses that we decided, or focus areas that we decided not necessarily to touch on, and kind of, again, focus the laser a bit sharper than all of the applications you mentioned. So the only application, there are several applications. When you talk about in-orbit servicing, that's what you're talking about, moving, repositioning satellites. Space debris is a problem, which I'm not sure who's going to pay for it. We have debris or junk in our front yard, and nobody is interested to clean that up. So who's going to clean that
right.
space, right?
That's true.
Right. It's already further. It's a bit further
Just
away.
Push it out to space. Just push it out to space.
Exactly. So there are multiple problems in the space industry, and when you think about, and then there is also a lot of companies that are targeting slightly different purposes of repositioning and things like that. What we came to realization out of all of that was that these are all very nice ideas. Very, very. Some of them are yet important problems too for some specific customers. But then when you really understand the last mile delivery piece and figure out, wait a minute, I want to, if you see people, I'm sure you have seen, I know you're a tech nerd, so you probably have seen how people deal with satellites in clean rooms, right? So they are very careful. There are specific measures when you touch a satellite. You can't grab it like a big watermelon and just put it next to your arms and just bring it somewhere. Even like center of gravity for all these satellites are different. So I had a hard time to understand and figure out what would be a simple solution. I said all of these things. I forgot to mention one thing. Simplicity is another aspect. When you look at SpaceX rockets, the SpaceX engines, even they are super, super, efficient, and the whole thing is very simple. So I wanted to keep that as part of my business as well, because that simplicity allows you to understand, identify, diagnose, correct problems as you go on. They are still complex. I mean, it's a rocket engine, but it's simpler. It's much simpler than many rocket engines built in the past compared to their other rocket engines in the past as well. So it's again the simplicity aspect. So when I put all those things, I was like catching a satellite in a space and kind of picking it. Like, how are you gonna pick it? You can't. There is not a interface. I think there will be a use case for this, but then alongside that use case, there needs to be a standard interface for a robotic arm to catch a satellite, so that you can safely capture them and move them to another orbit or another position, and then you can leave them there. I just don't believe in this whole idea of let's go with a scissor and we cut something. It's I think that's a bit still sci-fi and yet to come. I think it's a problem, needs to be solved, but it didn't attract my attention from an economical perspective. So when I really sat with very interesting venture capitalists, and I spent time with them, hours and hours, and discussed. And I was like, they are there and they get all these dilutions, and when they invest in a company, so they want to see the return, right? So, and we saw that in the recent market crash that the market is still suffering from. It's because, many companies showed really nice metrics that weren't realistic. So if you want to be realistic about how many satellites are you going to catch, and how are you going to catch it, how many companies would be willing to risk the life of their satellite so that you can catch it and reposition it. I think there is, despite that some people believe that there is a market, I do believe there is a market for it, or there is a need, but until there is a solution for it, I don't think we are that close. So I try to also figure out, how do we go about a solution that we can realize fast enough so that we can monetize the company's offerings quickly. Also, talking again about the Mars topic we talked about, I realized, fantastic idea. I mean, would be great if we go to Mars faster. But again, who is going to be paying me to get them to Mars, right? I mean, I know you are crazy about going Mars, so you might be one customer, but who else, right?
I'll give you a few dollars.
Right? So going there is very expensive, probably costing more than $3.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And, speaking of funding, I've kind of seen you on your LinkedIn feed and some other things. You've mentioned it now. I know you're looking for funding. You're looking for great people to partner with. Talk a little bit about that journey. I know that, part of coming to California is, finding the people that are interested in these sorts of investments. But it's always a challenge to tell your story on something that, you're working on, you're working towards. You've got all the right pieces pulled together. But maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So happy to. Funding is been interesting. It's been very hard to raise funding. I'm not going to lie about it. It's the market has, and I decided to wait for raising capital at that point. I'm not sure if it was a good decision or not, and I frankly mean that I'm not sure if it was a good decision or not, because on one hand side, we really mastered and polished the story, right? So at that time, if I wouldn't have gotten the money and figured out, okay, this is great, we got $10-20 million. Now let's go to Mars and let's spend this on moon and whatever. And that never really realizes to something, I would feel embarrassed. And now I had the time to figure out what is this story to really sharpen that scissor that you want to cut through a lot of very, very, very hard problems, ranging from political problems, talent problems, and many other things, to really rage through that and pull all these pieces together. And yet a market that is unclear, right? The space is an unclear market because a lot of the pieces are in their very, very early stages. Even though SpaceX is very, very far ahead, their systems are just booked for 2 years. I think if we would be in a more mature industry, we probably have to have a backlog for SpaceX for like 7, 8, 9, 10 years, maybe even, right? If they are at the same capacity. I'm not saying that it will remain on the same capacity. So I think there are like so many different variations of that, but of course, I think it's not what I'm trying to say is that my perspective to raising funding changed a little bit too, because it was great to see that this market is crashing. So I think if I would have gone on and spent the money on building all those fancy things I talked about last time, let's build a remote facility that we test on that scale that I had in my head. We are still building it today, but and we are close to start it, but it's not on that scale where we have spent millions of dollars on. Maybe for a reason of not having that couple of $1 million, but it's good to understand that you want to make that money. So when you are in a public market, you don't want to be embarrassed like all these companies, which actually are embarrassed because they had other perspectives that weren't realistic, or valuations that frankly were not realistic. So on that side, I'm feeling that it's been definitely a positive sign to not raise funding so immediately, to come here immediately raise. We raised funding, of course, but not as much as I thought. And also because I missed, frankly, the timing in the beginning, where market was much better. So talking about that, yeah, I think that's my perspective. And also the other thing, yeah, no, I think this is probably covering your answer.
Yeah. So if you were, saying, "Hey, this is what my perfect investor would look like," would it be more beneficial for you to have like a lot of, a bunch of different investors, all put in $100,000, or would it be better for you to get somebody like, Shark Tank style? Here's $10 million.
You have done your research, and you know me, or you're really like asking good questions, or just good at it. I don't know, but it's a great question. I have rejected so far about 21 VCs. Out of and I accepted 3. So, or not only VCs but investors. And I rejected another one yesterday. So 22. The reason for that has been multiple, right? So we have had 18 of those investors were foreign. So we had a lot of offers in the beginning when I have been just new in the US. They were like, oh, this guy is maybe new. Let's get him Chinese money or Hong Kong money or whatever. So we had all sort of crazy offers. We turned them down. We had clean money offers that we turned them down because we thought our values are not aligned. I had offers that I turned down because I thought it's not the right time. So for different reasons, I have rejected money. So, and I think I will continue to do that, because it's not only important, and I learned this because I spent time. I was lucky enough to spend some pretty quality time with some phenomenal investors. So when you do that, when you see something like if you taste a good food, you're not going to eat junk afterwards so easily, right? So you may do that once, but you're not going to be like, you have seen better. And so it's something that when I saw really fantastic investors, that they were self-made people, they made their own money, or they really can bring so much value that you can't even imagine, or they are really genuinely like fantastic people surrounded by good people. Good people surround themselves with good people. And so when you see all of those elements, especially in the investor community, there are many of them which are just looking for a very quick flip and return, or a startup community has been giving these people a lot of money, and so it's fair that many are interested into getting into it. But I decided, we will see later if it was a good decision, to set some boundaries, not super high bars, but rather high bars of who we want as investors in the company. And the reason for that, in like one word, is really good investors can add so much value, and bad investors can really drag you down. So which one do you want to have? It's your choice. It might be harder for someone like me who is just fresh in the United States and barely has those ties. But I think it's better. I actually remember there was a sentence I wrote to myself and just comes to my mind. I sent an email to myself. It's better to walk slow and get to your destination than run until your foot rubs and run on your ankle. So my imagination was that you just run because you want to just run, but then you lose your foot, right? Which one is better? Or rather go slower, but then grow healthy. So that's what I would summarize it.
Think fast and slow. Yeah. It's good advice. I think that there's something to be said for people who move fast, and there's something to be said for, people who take time to be discerning in what they're doing. And it sounds to me like you've run fast before, right?
Yeah.
and you've seen what that looks like,
Yeah.
and now you're a little wiser, and you're saying, hey, look, I really just want the right partners. And you're right. I think investors is more than money.
Sure.
They add value in different ways, like connections that they have, even ideas, not to necessarily get in the business. I mean, how many investors are like, I know rockets,
Right.
I know,
Right.
liquid electric propulsion systems,
Right.
like not very many, let's be
Not
honest,
many.
right?
Not very many, but also I have had really interesting conversations with generic VCs who don't know rockets, who don't know space, and I have been able to get money from them because they saw that, okay, this guy is talented, has got a good team. I see somehow how their product could become something, and they are betting on the founding team and founder and the team. So I think, and I have seen how those guys have been doing, right? So our first investor, Rahim Amidi, as part of Plug and Play, and his brother from AC Ventures, they both invested in Google early on. They backed Dropbox. I think they were, if I'm not mistaken, the first investor in Dropbox, which is done well, alongside many other companies, right? So they have seen that even if you think 20 years ago someone comes to you and says, I want to build this giant system that is gonna have all the information of the world, like that's not gonna make sense to anybody. So it's it's not their decision on what that product is, it's on their decision on these people know what they're talking about. And so I spent some time with these people on their investment committees, and I sat with them, and I enjoyed, seeing other founders pitch, and how these people then discuss about those companies and decide, oh, this is good company. Like they were talking about artificial intelligence usage in drug discovery, right? This is like, what are you talking about, right? It's not their field at all. And then the next startup, or the one before, like mine, was a space company. So how are you going to wrap your head around all these topics? You are not. You're just going to watch these people and vet them through other ways and experts, and say these are like good people, like, and they roughly know what they are talking about. And if they are not fully full of shit, then maybe we give them some money and see what it turns to. And so they have backed 1,500 companies today, and they have done well as investors. So and I see that repeatedly on really good investors, that they are not necessarily getting so nitty gritty on the topics at the earliest stage I'm talking about. Later is a bit different.
So you've been online, Ali, sharing a lot about like 3D printing lately, and you've got some relationships. I think even one of the investors in your business is one of your partners from a 3D printing standpoint. So I was curious to understand, like, how has this technology really changed in the way that we're building components for space, and specifically, how are you leveraging it in your business?
Yeah. So it's very interesting technology that I have looked into it for a number of years. I spent some time looking at Meltio. I spent some time looking at some other companies like EOS and Velo 3D and some other companies. Maybe you need to clip that part out because I don't want to say about their competitors. But one thing, so I'll re-answer it. So 3D printing is been very helpful for us. Our first or one of our first investors was a 3D printing company, and so it's been very interesting to watch their progress. And how they have came a long way to print a really hard material that is almost, it's very, very difficult to machine after it's printed, and you're just getting that out of a 3D printer. That's actually quite impressive. So I would say my answer is 3D printing is probably one of the pieces of the future. You have one machine that can print. Now we are talking about our spacecrafts being 80% or more 3D printed. So that's actually quite insane. Like we have the tanks, a lot of other components of the spacecraft to be 3D printed, and those things are not really things that would otherwise be as fast to manufacture, iterate on them, right? Now our spacecraft, one of our spacecrafts that is actually right now in 3D printing is 134 hours print. So you get one spacecraft in 134 hours. How much can you do in 134 hours as a company, right? So get one spacecraft out.
That's all. It's no big deal. Yeah,
that's
right.
all. So it's been a very interesting piece. Other companies like Relativity have worked on it. They have taken some considerable amount of time to develop their own printers and so on. So we didn't want to do that. We wanted to use the technologies that are out there, and but a good one. So we came across Velo 3D, and we tested our first engine with them that was manufactured with them. It was a very complex geometry, so I have a whole session about that on another panel where I talked about how that 3D printer did help us, what kind of challenges we had and whatnot. So it's been a very interesting cooperation, and has helped us to manufacture extremely difficult geometries. And I think it's going to be a piece of our future as well.
Well, I think it takes it out of, even having to do everything on what I would say dry land, right? Like you can go out in space. I mean, there's 3D printers already out up in the space station and other things where if you can get the raw materials, like then you can create things wherever you need to. And I do think that allows for us to go much farther in exploration than we would be able to do without it, because now we break a tool, we break something on a space station or spacecraft, and it can be fixed on the spot and replaced, versus before just the cost of manufacturing these parts and then having to bring a bunch of them with you not knowing which ones you're going to use or which ones you're going to need, right? And now you just got to bring the right materials with you that can be put in the 3D printer. So it really does blow my mind what you can do. And 100 and something hours to build a spacecraft. I mean, look, sign me up. All right. It sounds great.
Yeah. Also, one more thing that I don't want to use this stage as advertisement for.
No, do it, man. Tell them all about you. I want you to be so successful that you take me to space.
Sounds good. So one thing that we have really I heard this sentence in the beginning when I think it was my first meeting with Velo. They said this is not an R&D machine. If you want to do R&D, go buy another machine. I was like, maybe that's a bit harsh. I'm coming here and I'm asking you, I want to buy a printer. And so now I understand really the value of it. When we designed our engine, it took us 3-4 months more than we expected to print it, because it's a manufacturing thing. Like we can do 1, we can do 10, we can do 100. So it's the same thing that took us a long time to manufacture the first spacecraft. It's going to take us some more time to get from a beta spacecraft to a real flight hardware spacecraft. But when we have that, we can produce 100 of them if we have 100 printers. So that is really, and 100 printers, meaning that we can produce 100 of them in 134 hours. Right? So how is that changing the industry, where you are having a SpaceX repeatedly launching the rockets every 5 days average, right? You want to go up there and then come back, and we will have like 60 satellites, transporters that are keep being shooted up by SpaceX, and then we bring them one by one back and do that again and again. So and even if one of them, like Amazon, right, you get a piece of hardware from Amazon and you're like, this is not good, they'll just order and send you another one. So we want to be, this one burnt, good, then we have another one out of the printer. Is it qualified? Yeah, the processes are verified. So We are very close to verifying that. And then talking also about the defense aspect and how you can really do tactical response if something is needing to be urgently or faster than usual on board of a mission or a quick response, then we also can do that because it's again 3D printed. So talking about the advantages of and why we stuck with or staying around with that technology, it's not only one reason.
Yeah, there's a multitude, an overwhelming number of reasons to do it and to continue to invest time and energy on it. I am curious. So let's say you had all the funding in the world. Let's just say like, hey, Bill Gates threw all the money at you, and you were like, hey, he's not such a bad guy, you know. I'll take his money, right? Because we're doing big things. Whatever. What kind of timeline are we actually looking at? You know, to get a functioning like liquid electric propulsion engine like going? Because you were testing this thing. I watched the video. You were excited because you got it running for like 20 seconds or something like that. I don't know if that's good. You were excited about it, but you know, what does this mean? What does this mean like for the average person if you do get it going too? I mean, how long before space travel is available to a guy like me because of engines like yours, right?
I think space travel is going to be earlier than many other people think available to them. Talking about our engine and the timeline for it, we have a big test coming up right tomorrow.
Yes.
That we have been preparing for. I was working on it until 2 a.m. last night, preparing this stuff. So it's we are moving fast, right? I mentioned about the funding and things that have been harder in the market. We moved there slower, and there are things that are in our control, like testing. We'll not stop there. We'll go as fast as we can. We have done, I think, a total cycles of testing, about maybe 100 tests so far on our engine. We have had successful tests on electric propulsion, right? We have had successful tests on chemical propulsion. And the reason the test that is coming up tomorrow and the importance of it is that we are for the first time testing the combined approach that we have talked about it for a number of months. And so we know that EP works. We know that we can create plasma in our engine, which was not trivial at first, and was not trivial to create plasma at such a high pressure and in normal atmosphere, which is also something that I'm not sure how many people have done, not so many, if at all. And now chemical propulsion has been around for a while. So now we have one engine that single engine is capable of doing both separately. So now we want to press both buttons at the same time and see what happens.
I'm so excited, man.
We are very excited about that. And what it means for an average person is that it's the same thing that happened with hybrid cars, but it's in a space, right? So hybrid cars been an interesting piece to electric vehicles. They have been an interesting piece for more sustainable travel, a sustainable transportation mean. And so that's the same meaning, except with the difference that if you have a hybrid car in a space and you have solar panels to use that energy towards going further away, I think that is what it really means to our future of space travel, as well as what we are working on for last mile delivery of payload in space.
So you heard it here first, folks. Ali is creating the first Prius of space. He's going to do it. I love it. This is like, I mean, look, you're much smarter than me. I'm clever to say the very least, but like the stuff, I mean, you bring it down to my level. So thank you. Graciously. Thank you. But the stuff really is like, it's mind blowing to think that what was science fiction just a handful of years ago is now potentially going to happen in our lifetime. We're not talking about like just going to the moon. We're talking about doing like living on the moon, like we're talking about, people living in Mars or just traveling around and getting up close to Jupiter, like things that could potentially happen.
Right.
And because I think, and this is a dumb technology guy, a non-techie tech guy, like I think some of the biggest challenges for space travel really is like because it costs so much to get up into the atmosphere, and it costs so much to get from point A to point B. But by the time you've gotten there, like you don't have any payload to bring you back. right? And so these engines that you're creating, and some of the sustainability things that we're doing, and biology and things like that to be able to, grow things in outer space. I mean, all these things are working towards our ability to, get off this planet and go check things out in other places, which is
Right.
fascinating to me, right? It's real Star Wars stuff.
It's a Star Wars stuff, but it's also reminding me when I read earlier books. When you read books about how Christopher Columbus came to America, right? That was another area, and I think in one way or another, I think colonization of some other planets is not out of sight, and going there and coming back is also not out of our. I don't think it's out of our lifetime. But again, I want to also emphasize on that there has to be a market for these
Yeah.
things. So it's gonna be an interesting time to see that develop, and then to see that materialize, and then to see that happen sustainably, safely, securely, and sustainably, so that you can do that multiple times and maybe colonize.
So, do you have any theories about how fast these engines could potentially go at full capacity once we've kind of developed them the way that I'm sure you're intending to do?
Yeah, so I mean, talking about really the technicalities of the engine, we are targeting about 8 kilometer per second um, exhaust velocity. So meaning that the particles coming averagely out of the engine have a speed of 8 kilometer in 1 second. So in 1 second, they are 8 kilometer away from you. That is, of course, not the speed you would get out of it. It depends on a number of things like mass and the thrust and the force it has. There has been faster engines than ours, so this is not the fastest engine. But in some ways, if I want to really compare the engine technology that we are working on with some of the things that have revolutionized, for example, air transport, I would say it's the way that turbofans, these bigger engines that are a bit bigger in diameter, but have helped us to travel from New York to Amsterdam. These are engines that have helped us to go there with not so much fuel, so that you can go with one go and one tank in air transport. So it's not the fastest like the engines that are used in fighter jets. Those are called really jet engines that are not having turbo fans or a bigger fan blade around them. So we are making it more efficient.
Hmm.
In a space we don't have air to compensate and add efficiency. That's what happened with that big blade. So the big blade basically sucked more air given the rotation of the jet engine, so it makes it more efficient. And it was a smart idea. It helped our travel air travel to become something that you can sit on a plane and go to Amsterdam from even somewhere thousands and thousands of miles away. And so that's what we are trying to do in a space. In a space, you don't have air, but you have electric power through the solar panels you have. So we are compensating that to make the engine more efficient, so that you're having a powerful engine, but you're not spending so much mass architecture on it to go to further spaces. And so that's really what we are trying to do, and trying to make use cases for it to make money with it, so that we can do even bigger things than these two things in soon future, maybe traveling to Mars and beyond that.
Yes, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. So I have to ask, not that you're an oddity, but let's be honest, not a lot of people are like, I want to be a rocket scientist. And honestly, a lot of people aren't smart enough to be a rocket scientist. So I would say I would love to be a rocket scientist, but I just don't have it. I'll just be completely honest. But let me ask you this. So like, where do you find talent? Where do you find people to help you build things like this? Like, where are you looking? What rocks are you looking under?
It's For me, over the past 1 year has been a bit of a swift back and forth on the talent aspect, and part of it is because I learned this lesson more. We talked about it a little bit before the show as well. That it's not only skill set. You know, there are a lot of skilled people around in California who have worked on numerous projects similar to ours in different ways, and so those are great people to have on the first glance. However, as you know, my biggest vision for Plasmos is to build a company that culturally is very different than other space companies that are out in California. So I've said that more quietly, but really my intention is that people get frustrated at other companies for a number of reasons. They are overworked. They are have experiencing really hard psychological environments around them. And it's not that we are laying around and not doing work in Plasmos, but it's more about understanding the people's boundaries and respecting that they deserve to rest when they want it, and that you have to drive them by motivation and not force. So there are a couple of really small elements that change how people work, and we have seen it in our company, right? Our company has been around now for 1 year. It's for a startup, not only 1 year for a startup is really long. So we have seen that among people like we have had even before this 1 year that we incorporated the company, like Michael Kaidar, that is one advisor, but he's working with me day to day. So he has a full-time job. So it depends, how do I ask him, how do I motivate him? So he looks around for different pieces of technology, information, whatever, measurement things, so that we really can progress on what we want to do. Same thing with our engineers, same thing with other things. So my biggest vision for the company is really to build that culture so that people are frustrated somewhere else and say, okay, now it's time to go to Plasmos, and not necessarily think about, okay, I want to have this specific brand, but I want to go somewhere that I work by motivation, and there is a new principle that I'm establishing in the company. So I would say that's really my secret sauce in the company that will play out. It's going to take a little while, but I'm definitely putting a lot of hard work in that.
Yeah, I have no doubt that you're going to make it happen. And anybody who is fortunate enough to go on the ride with you is just that fortunate.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I like to cap off my show, and this is different than the last one that you were on with me. But I do like to cap it off a little bit differently. We're not going to do the weird and funny questions where I make you dance, or you tell me all your fantasies. Yeah. It's going to be a little more educational than it had been in the past. Not that we had a good time last time. I remember we had a really good time.
Yeah.
And you're a good dancer, so maybe next time. But I call it the 3 do's and a don't. So for you specifically, I want to ask you a question. You're really the next generation of space exploration, but there's a generation that is coming after you, right? Of space enthusiasts, people who are kind of space curious. Let's call them that, right?
Right.
So what are 3 things that you would tell yourself, right? Your younger self, to focus on and really hold on to? And then what is the one thing you'd tell yourself, absolutely don't give into this. Don't think about this. Don't do this. And this could be as simple as a few steps, or it could really be more mindset or focus or something like that. So impart some words of wisdom on us.
So I start with the last thing. I'm more passionate and probably also thinking about it. Just because I've seen this video, I'm sure you've seen it as well, the video of Stanley where he's talking about, if you have an idea that you genuinely think it's good, don't let some idiot talk you out of it.
Yeah.
And so I have seen that in the Valley, where some investors, it has happened to me. I was almost about close to give up on the engine idea, very close. And I actually talk about that maybe another time in more depth after we are a bit further away. And a lot of people, when they don't understand your idea, they'll try to make it smaller so they understand it. If they are smaller minds. And I actually don't agree with you that you are not as smart as me or whatnot. You're very smart. That shows and shines in your questions. But so it's probably that advice that I would give younger myself. Not that I haven't done it. I think I have been blessed to be surrounded by people like Dirk Hockey or Henning Boots or many others in the earlier years and right now, that they really understand that idea and see the brilliance into it, that they say, even if I'm close to say, yeah, I think this is not going to work, they're like, no, 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 I think there is something there and you should keep pursue it. So that's the advice I would give my younger self, just in case these people wouldn't have been around me. The advice for younger next generation that are coming up, I think education, you kind of alluded to that in your introduction. Education has been a challenge for me in when I was young, right? So I have been to schools that have not necessarily been Stanford, Harvard. Not that they were bad, they were great for me because I went away and learned things by myself. And so doing so, and I think this is becoming more and more and more and more important in our next generation, is that there is all sort of activities around us. There is all sort of distractions around us, like from social media starting upwards to learn new dance moves every day and busy ourselves with it. I think education becomes a very, very important piece with the focus on knowledge. And so I have, when I wrote that book of fundamentals of aerospace engineering, with number of fantastic experts and colleagues, it's a book to tell basics to people. And I think very often we forget things, go back to basics and principles that are not really hard. And for example, I am learning now about electronics. We are getting into design of our spacecraft's electronics, and I'm not an electronics guy. I've tried it in high school. It was not my thing, and I'm going back to it. It's not going to be my thing, but I'm looking at learning it in a different way. And I have a really good mentor that has built the engine control unit for Porsche, that is training me on that. And it's funny, every time I ask him a question, I'm like, this sensor or that sensor. He explains me the theory, and he sends me a link. I open that link. It's the theory of why such a sensor and how that works. And so at first I was annoyed. I was like, man, give me the answer. I want to know this or that. That's a really simple question. So then you learn, no, there is the basic fundamentals. It's a parallel series. It's a parallel or a series or a transistor, and what's this? And you combine these things. And when you do that over time and time, now I'm starting to realize I picked 8 different sensors for engine test facility that I'm building during the next few weeks together with a team. And I could pick them. I was like, oh, I feel comfortable. This sensor has these characteristics. It has these frequencies that I'm looking for. It has the voltage that fits the controller. And so it's a basic thing, right? It's not about this or that brand or this brand. It's becoming about what comes into the basics of that. So I would say that the knowledge on and basics is probably the 2 out of the 3, and the third probably is passion. Follow your passion. Do what you love. That's what we always talked about, right?
Yeah, that was the theme of the conversation we had the last time, to follow your passion, which I really love because you got a lot of passion, dude. So what's one thing that you absolutely was like, don't do it? It could be don't quit on your dreams, don't stop believing. I mean, name a song lyric, but what is it for, Ali? What are you telling yourself, and what do these young guys and girls need to know?
Not necessarily that. I actually maybe elaborate on it a little bit too. It's that since I've came to the US, I saw one thing, that people are they go into the hamster wheel and do something. You do first thing, second thing, third thing, fourth thing, fifth thing, and then you go start from beginning again and again and again. And I think there is a point of the value you're adding, and that hamster wheel is not always good. So it's good to go in the hamster wheel. It's good to stay in there for a while, and it's also good and important and healthy to come out of it and take a break. And this is not about going into acting necessarily. That's one interest I found recently among many other interests that I have. Like I play piano and hike and
of course you do. But of course you do. Well, Ali, as usual, you were a really fun guest to have. I always like to kind of close it with, hey, if you really liked Ali and what he's doing, I certainly say share this with somebody. Share it with an investor, a good one, right, or whatever. But and then make sure you like the video and subscribe. But secondarily, like Ali, where do people find you? Like where can they reach out and chat and follow, invest, stay close to, or just get in your proximity?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I spend a bit of time, an hour a day on LinkedIn. So it's easy to find me there, connect or follow or hit me. It's happy to catch up. Also, I mentor some people. I recently got myself into mentoring people from the military that transition into the civil, world and want to learn how do they get into startups and industry. So, I'm doing all sort of things to help humanity go another step further, however I can. So happy to catch up with folks out there and help however I can.
He actually means it, folks. I know this guy. He's great. He doesn't ghost you, which, some of my guests have never done that. No, I'm just kidding. Ali, great conversation. I think you dump trucked a bunch of really amazing information and thoughts and ideas on us. Any closing thoughts before we jump off here?
No, just my closing thoughts are that you do a great podcast and you are really fantastic at it. I told you this last time. It's still applicable this time. So keep it up, man.
My man, I paid him. Check's in the mail. All right. Well,
last time you said that too, but I never got a check. Well, we were going to chat about that.
That's because you moved.
Damn it. Good reason.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to What the Tech. For more, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tune in next week.